fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
The constitutional point of view was critical for Jefferson's support of the Bill of Rights.
As we mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens, I can hear you!
Is time running out?
It's Saturday. Welcome to the Hayden Collins radio program, The Intelligence Syndicate. Looks like I called one right. Called a couple of them right. It's pretty obvious and it's all coming to the surface. But I have to go somewhere else this weekend. We're going to play shoulda, woulda, coulda in finances. We're going to talk about the staple of the socialist economy that's always brought to the attention of everyone when they discuss, look, this socialist country did it right. Everything's working well there. We can do it better. Oh, take a deep breath, people. This is going to be a fun ride. And not only that, we can actually see how one capitalist economy creates an effect on all of the socialist economies around the world. I tell you, let's start with that, and then we'll get to the punchline. Okay, we'll start with that. So, if you throttle down the American economy to 2% growth and guarantee that 2% growth, then socialist countries who, for lack of a better term, have controlled growth. Now, let's explain controlled growth for a second. Controlled growth. The socialist governments have their social programs that they have to pay for. So they have to have X amount of growth to have those programs. If they don't have that growth, they can't pay for their programs and they create deficits. Okay? Now, Portugal, Greece, Italy, Spain ran into deficits so bad they don't even make the news anymore. It's so bad. They just don't. It's just not even in the news. Everybody knows they're broke. Restructuring this, restructuring that, restructuring the other. And Spain has not had a government in a year. They basically have not had a government in the year. And the most amazing thing in Spain that has happened is the unemployment rate dropped from 20-something%. That's like 25, 26%. It's dropped 10 points, and their growth has gone up with no government. There's a warning sign for you right there. That should tell you something. Okay, but let's get back to controlled growth. If you're in a socialist country, your wages are controlled, your health care is controlled, the economy is controlled, and you can only achieve, now pay close attention to this, you can only achieve what the government is going to allow you to achieve. No more, no less. That's it. You can only achieve what the socialist government will allow you to achieve. It's controlled. Okay? So now, let's think about this. All of the European Union is a controlled environment. Everything is controlled. Now, it's controlled based on a couple of factors. They have, some growth. They have some economic fortitude, but not a lot. But they've taxed themselves into corners where they don't have a lot of wiggle room. Now, this is what I mean by a lot of wiggle room. Let's say, for the sake of discussion, theoretically, of course, that there is a capitalist country out there. I don't know, a free one, yeah. And this capitalist country said, you know what? We had a 50% tax rate during the Obama administration for any monies coming back inside the United States. Now, this tax rate, what it did, it made money stay overseas. So if I happen to make a lot of money in Hong Kong, I'd have to give 50% of it to the U.S. government if I got back to the United States with it. Or I'd have to leave it in Hong Kong and invest it there in hopes that the laws would change sooner or later so I could get my money out. Well, apply that to any socialist country in Europe. Let's say I made the money in France, and it's, a couple of $1 trillion. Do I want to give $1 trillion to the U.S. government in tax money just to get my $1 trillion back? No. I'm going to invest it in whatever best investment I can find in a socialist country and hopefully make more money on it and, buy me a house over there or do whatever, okay? Now, we're exaggerating numbers here, but I think you're getting the gist. So, President Trump comes to office and the rules change. They knock it down in the teens. Well, that's a heck of a lot more attractive, okay? A 30+% savings and bringing my money back to the United States where I live, where I want my kids' future to grow, where everything else. So in the past 2 years, we've seen a lot of money that was being held hostage in foreign countries come back to the United States. Big time money. Trillions. Okay, let's revisit the socialist again. The socialist, without outside money coming in to fuel their system, are starting to suffer. They're starting to go into deficits again. They're starting to go into debt again because they have no wiggle room and controlled environments. Now, I'm being real basic here. I know I'm being real basic, but I'm being real basic on purpose because if I get into too deep of the weeds, we're going to lose the intent and the philosophy of this conversation. So stay with me on this. You got one capital country, all of a sudden they go into high growth mode. Somebody steps on the accelerator, changes the tax laws, and the money that was trapped overseas is now coming home. So that creates a vacuum. They were taxing this money. The socialists were taxing this money. The socialists were looking at this money as investments. The socialists were, counting on this money because it was controlled. It was captured. And now that it's no longer captured and controlled, it's not there. So where do the socialists get their money for their social programs if they can only tax themselves? And all of a sudden the big gravy train that used to be the United States sending money out everywhere is not sending money out everywhere. The United States is taking care of itself. The United States has got 4% plus growth. The United States has the best unemployment rate. I don't want to say in the history because I know in wartime it was freaking incredible, but you get the gist. I'd say it's probably the best unemployment rate in 50 years. Maybe even 60 years. I don't know. But think about this. All cylinders are firing now. The United States is growing exponentially. And the money is being reinvested in the United States. All of a sudden, bridge projects are happening. You don't hear about that in the news. All of a sudden, infrastructure projects are happening. But you don't hear about that in the news. All of a sudden, holy cats. You notice how quiet it's been in education? There's no new stupid programs like No Child Left Behind or Race to the Top or Common Core. You notice those arguments have gone away because schools have left the programs? Because funding is no longer revolving around those programs anymore? It looks like funding is going to shift to, I don't know, educational merit program? Holy crap! Competition in education? Who heard of such a thing? Oh my gosh. Yeah, I was reading an interesting article. Let me tell you about this article. It was in the early 1920s. And I know I'm diving off a little bit here, but I got to tell you how much we've grown in education. In the early 1920s, the school marm or the teacher, she had special rules in her contract. And in her contract that she had to sign, let me read one or two of these things to you. It is hilarious, and it created these poor teachers that, okay, hilarious and awful. How about that? Okay, so here's the contract. It's called a teaching contract. Okay, it's 1920s. The teacher agrees to not to get married. If she gets married, the contract becomes null and void immediately. Not to keep company with men. To be home between the hours of 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. unless attendance is required at a school function. Do not loiter in downtown or in ice cream parlors. Not to leave town at any time without permission of the chairman of the trustees. Not to smoke cigarettes. Not to drink beer or wine or whiskey. Do not ride a carriage or automobile with any man except other than brother or father. Not to dress in bright colors. Not to dye hair. Not to wear less than 2 petticoats. I'm wondering who checked that one. Not to wear dresses shorter than 2 inches above the ankles. Oh, dear God. To keep the schoolroom clean. She was also the janitor. And not to wear face powder, mascara, or paint the lips. Oh, dear God, the controls. You know, that didn't last long. Teachers got married, and then they left the teaching profession in droves, and all of a sudden these guys discovered, we ought to start making some exceptions here. This isn't working out in our best interest. Now, apply that to Europe, okay? Things aren't working out so well, and it's not working out in their best interest, so I expect to see some changes over there shortly. All right, let's go back to the controlled environment. The controlled environment in Europe. The American economy. If socialism does not have the engine, the economic engine, to fuel itself, it's dependent upon outside fuel. Now I'm talking money. And for the longest time, the outside fuel has been the U.S. dollar. And the U.S. economy has been, feeding socialism. We do foreign aid. Up to about 2 years ago, our deficit was out of control for these countries. They weren't buying from us, but we had to buy from them. And that seems to be changing. Thank God. Maybe we can get something for our children so they could have a future. That might be nice. Good economy. So now let's take it to the next phase. Let's say the American economy is doing so well that the cost of things, which we're going to call it inflation, in socialist economies goes up because it creates shortages. Now, how could there be shortages in a socialist economy? Venezuela. Just leave it like that. That's all I'm going to say. Venezuela. How could there be shortages in a socialist economy? There you go. They're protesting in the street. The thing that kills me about Venezuela, was it 4 years ago? They said they were taking all the guns in, so they brought everybody's guns in. You can't have guns anymore. And then 2 years ago, they started putting them on rations. They're eating their dogs and cats or whatever the case may be. And now they can't even fight their way out of the socialism. They can't, because they don't have the weapons to defend themselves. It's freaking awful. Freaking awful. God help those people. All right, so here you go. The money's not being put into the socialist countries. Not at the rate it was before. And the U.S. economy is growing so fast, it's creating inflation. And as it creates inflation, things like healthcare cost that the government tries to control overseas goes up exponentially. So here's what I opened up with this. I said I was right again. We did a show on pigs, Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain a little over a year ago, and we talked about this very same subject. And we talked about, the economic impacts of what happens when you have competition in the market. And it's happened. It's happened in a big way. Friday, the country of Finland, I guess it was the finance prime minister and his staff, all resigned. The government went insolvent. They have no money because their health care cost exceeded, and they could not cut anything. The laws were in place where they couldn't cut social programs. They couldn't do anything else. So now everything's failed. And so that entire, and that's not a true socialist government, by the way. That's kind of a modified monarchy, just so you know. But it's falling apart. And the reason it's falling apart is you can't have a good social program without an excellent economic program. If you have a controlled economic program, you have to have controlled social programs. Well, the controlled social programs exceeded the cost of what they could bring in. Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. Small town radio. Oops, left the phone turned on. Sorry about that, guys. All right, so Finland kind of has taken full example of this entire scenario and watched their monies change and deteriorate. And essentially, it's going to start a ripple effect. And the ripple effect that's going to take place is each one of these socialist countries that cannot handle the inflation, and they have controlled environments and controlled economies, will not be able to control the cost that's coming to them, which is going to limit services. Now, this is a whole supply and demand thing that they don't like, because, you know, socialism doesn't like supply and demand. It's creeping into their nations whether they like it or not, only because of the fact that the one country that has been feeding their socialism, allowing them to maintain their socialism, is no longer doing that. We're not controlling the cost of the dollar. We're not controlling the cost of our trade. We're trading, but we're not controlling the cost of it. So it's not like China, where they can reduce the value of their dollar here and there and change things out, you know, and impact the market that way, and nobody cares. Well, they care because people lose money, but, you know, nobody wants to play with it. That was another thing I looked at. There were, you know, so many millionaires in China, so many of them. And when you look at the value of the Chinese dollar or whatever it's called, and you find out, well, they're not millionaires. I mean, what happened here? But they kind of are, they're kind of not. Some of them were smart enough to invest outside their own country. Oh, in a capitalist country. Oh, the United States. Yeah, that's right. Just want to make sure that's there. So, watch Finland. Watch what happens. There might even be a bailout. There might even be money's thrown to them. I don't think the money's going to come from the United States. I think it's going to come from other socialist governments that are trying to prop up their form of government. And the very sad thing that they're discovering, and they're quickly discovering this, like England did for a long time. You know, at one time, what was it? They were really proud last year that only 9,000 some odd people died in waiting rooms in England for their healthcare system. It was a proud moment. It's like, wait a second. You got people dying in your waiting rooms to receive care, and they can't receive care. And this is a proud moment because there's less than 9,000 of them, or whatever the number was. It was pretty close there. It tells you something. In Venezuela right now, they've turned off all the power. The only people that have power are the ones that have generators. Nobody else has power. So the running water doesn't run to the houses anymore, so people are going out and filtering water in the streams and taking water back home and boiling it because they can't run the water. And then one of the pumps is so bad they filmed it, it's actually pumping mud because nobody cleaned the screen. They aren't doing the maintenance. Okay, so without the maintenance, you know, you get all kinds of crap in your water. You know, the only reason I bring this up is one of them is kind of I told you so thing. It doesn't take a genius to see this kind of stuff happening. You just have to work through the numbers and pay attention. You know, it's not relative to anything. It's like, okay, here it comes. And this may take, 5 years, 10 years, but you're going to see serious changes over there, and it's not going to be the socialist government that you know and love, and the healthcare systems are going to be limited based on the monies, and that'll take a while as well. Some of them may even cancel their healthcare systems altogether. I mean, there were years where you couldn't get drugs in Greece because they couldn't afford the drugs. You know, they had to get bailouts for their own drugs. You couldn't get aspirin. The black market for aspirin was incredible. So now we're to the point where Europe and the almighty euro is going to define how many of their programs is going to succeed and how many of their programs are going to fail, and how many of them are going to limp along with people dying in the waiting rooms. That's what we got to look forward to. My hope in this is that it's going to create a competition between nations, and then everybody's going to compete, and everybody's going to make money, and everybody's going to go forward, and they won't have to worry about mud coming out of their water lines, and they'll have power to their house and services, because if some person doesn't provide it, another one will, because there's an opportunity to make money there. And I'm probably pretty sure that it'll be maintained. All right, we come back from the break. We got a couple of rotations this week. The Oops, I Arted is taking a week off. I guess it's midterms. That's what you get with college kids. And the Roundtable's playing, but the Roundtable is live this week. Now, every other week or so we do live Roundtables, and I'll be at Santa Cruz, University of California, Santa Cruz next week. So we have, Roundtables everywhere. Now, the ones that are live we don't put on the air because I don't have permission to use their voices. So we'll rotate those through as those happen. All right, so the Hayden Collins radio program, go out and be about it.